June 17th meeting of 2024. Election of the town of Winchester by the Sea to order. Yep.
Yeah.
Brian,
Finally, here, yes.
Kathy. Yeah. And it's here. So,
Don is here.
okay.
Recording.
The first item is public comments on non-agenda items. Are there- Okay.
So you're gonna.
Put yourself on mute.
He's working on it.
It's, everything's muted.
Is yours?
Are we
muted?
good? All right, I think we're good.
Okay. Fine. Are there any comments? Yes.
I have some public comment.
Name and address.
William Bell, 4 Raymond Street.
Thank you.
First, I want to thank everybody that was involved with the working on the cemetery down on Magnolia Avenue. It came out nice. It was all set for Memorial Day. The only thing they didn't get to was the double wall at the bottom of near the brook.
Mhm.
And they'll probably get to that when the cemeteries burn out in July.
Mhm.
But I wanted to thank everybody that was involved with that. I wanted to make a comment about the beach circle.
Mhm.
Parks and Rec had the DPW up there and they cut back 8 feet from the wall, the stone wall.
Mhm.
And it looks beautiful. I would ask of the board that if there isn't anybody that has anything against it, that I would get down there and touch it up a little bit. The end of the stone wall
Mhm.
where the castle is, and then there's like 12 feet of berm.
Mhm.
After that, there are boulders under those berms. So if they could come back and dig into the berm and expose the boulders, you'd have another 6 or 8 feet of swing in that circle.
Are you suggesting that you would do that, or we would like us to have the DPW do that?
Well, I could touch up where the castle is, so you could see the end of the stone wall myself, but I can't
Okay, fine, yeah.
take care of the berm.
Are you prepared to fight Dave McDougal for this job?
Dave McDougal doesn't touch the circle.
I know.
That's one of
He's
the things
done
he
good
doesn't
job.
touch. But I appreciate everything he does. And lastly, I'd like to request the removal from my name in the Community Star Award. Because when I started this, March 11th of this year, I was requesting for a grand marshal for the parade,
Mhm.
and it has taken a different direction, so I'd like to be removed from it.
Okay. Debbie, can you- Thank you.
And that's all I have.
Did you think that you were up for the award?
What's that?
Do you think you were up for the award?
No, no. I'm probably too young.
Billy,
Thank you for your time.
Billy, thank you.
Your phone. Hey.
No, it's your phone.
So,
I have no chairman's report. We seem to be including the things that we needed, that we listed for today. Are there other action items that have occurred to anybody we should add to the list? Yes.
Isabella Bates, 2 Mascanoma. I don't know if this is, I talked with Greg. I'm hoping very much that it will be resolved that the Strong Women weightlifting program can return to the community center. And that I don't know if it's an action item that's needed on the part of the select board to accomplish that. I know originally there was a contract that we approved at town meeting, which then fell apart. but I don't know if at this point there's an action item that's needed.
At this point, I believe that is entirely in the hands of the Hybrid Point Associates.
Okay, I didn't know if Manchester was contracting with them.
Not yet.
Not yet. So they know that we remain very interested. And so,
No action item today.
We can't unilaterally take their property, even for a couple of hours a week.
but we are hopeful that at least, even on a temporary basis, before the final things are in place, that there might be a resolution to the class.
Seeing no other comments, we're interviewing Georgia Prendergast and Diane Lindquist for the zoning board of appeals. Let's start with Georgia.
I'm Diane.
Yes, that's it. Oh, hi,
Okay.
Diane. Yeah, I'm Georgia. Do you want me to stay seated or is the podium better?
You can stay seated.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about why you're interested in this position.
Yes, so simply put, I love zoning. I'm a zoning nerd. I love planning. And I'm mainly on the municipal side, so every town I've lived in, I've tried to volunteer on the zoning board, so I moved from Norwood, I was on that zoning board. And by career, I have my master's in land use and planning and community development. And most recently, I just left being the town planner in Danvers for more than 5 years. So I staffed the Conservation Commission and the zoning board. And aside from that, I really love bylaws and I know, that's not
How are you?
But I do find it very interesting, and I recently made a career change, and I'm now working for the DEP in my environmental side. So I'm not able to scratch my zoning itch. And then aside from my personal interest in it, I think it's important to give to the community. I also think it's important to have a younger voice on the community. I say younger lightly. I think that's it could be a broad range of ages, but it is good to have younger women representation on our boards. And I saw there's 2 vacancies, so it really seemed like a perfect opportunity. I have not been in Manchester long. I lived here about two and a half years. Was not raised here, but I live here now, and the past 2.5 years I've enjoyed it. So I want to be able to get back.
John. do you have-
Really, thank you for raising your hand. Apparently, you've raised it in previous circumstances with other places. I look at the background and what you've said, and no training, no orientation, nothing is needed. You hit the ground running here, so great. I thank you.
You had me at zoning.
No, seriously, your background is excellent, and I think it's nice to have someone who is new to Manchester also represented on the board. I think that fresh set of eyes is important, so I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Right?
You know what you're getting into? Have you spoken with the chair?
Yes, I had a great conversation with Sarah. Yeah.
So we'll decide who's the bigger nerd later. Okay.
And just thank you for stepping up to do it. You sound way more than qualified, so thank you.
I'm qualified in some members.
Speak for yourself, Brian.
I think he is, yeah.
I have no questions. Thank you very much.
Are you gonna have individual motions on each
Why
candidate?
why don't we do it individually then? And consider motion.
I move the select board appoint Georgia Pendergrass to fill Catherine Howe's term as a full member of the zoning board of appeals from July 1st, 2024 to July 30th, June. Thank you. Friendly amendment. 2025.
Second.
Meeting ready for a vote? John?
Yes.
Dan, yes?
Yes.
Kathy, yes? Brian?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And, Diane?
Yes, I've lived in Manchester since 2015, very happily. I think it's a wonderful town, and I retired a couple of years ago from Boston University. I'm a lawyer, practiced about 35 years before retiring. And I did a lot of different kinds of law. I'm not a zoning nerd, so I don't take care of that.
Keep balance.
Yeah.
I'm kind of a bylaws nerd, I have to say. There's a fond spot in my heart for bylaws. I think it's an important, zoning appeals board is important to most of the citizens, all of the citizens in Manchester. And I think it's important that these things be taken seriously and decided well. And sounds interesting, so I'd like to do that.
Jeff?
I don't really have any questions. Thank you.
Same question, have you spoken to the chair?
I haven't.
I think that the chair was derelict.
And you're aware, and I'll channel the inner Becky here,
Yes,
and the time, we'll have a time to, forward for this.
Yes.
I'm good.
Okay. Just one question, since zoning wasn't your primary background area, is there a particular interest? Or what particular area of, that's.
As a lawyer, I practiced employment law, commercial litigation, healthcare compliance, a lot of different things, a little bit of property. And I just love the law. And I love the process of reading something, interpreting it, applying it, and all that sort of thing. That's right. So that's what appealed to me.
I think Lou's skill set is also very welcome on that particular committee, so thank you for stepping up.
I have no questions. Thank you for offering your service.
So this is your first shot at public service, shall we say?
Oh, well. Maybe so.
Okay,
I've done a lot of community work and a lot of.
okay,
nonprofit
but in
work.
terms of town government, your first,
Before this, I lived in Washington DC,
Not much town there.
no.
and before that, it was Tucson, Arizona. And I grew up in the South Shore, so I've never been in a community that is small enough that I really feel like part of the community.
Oh, So we engender volunteerism here,
Yes,
that's
I
good.
think-
I'm glad to hear that. So great, I thank you for raising your hand and it will be a wonderful experience.
Is there a motion?
I move the select board appoint Diane Lundquist as the second alternate member of the zoning board of appeals from July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025.
Second,
The chair says that's actually the first alternate that's being replaced.
Oh,
No.
oh, is that right?
Just a point of.
sorry.
The first alternate would be me. That's being replaced.
You're being replaced?
Well, that accounts for the smile on Sarah's.
I didn't want you to smile. Mistake. Okay.
We had spoken, Jim Dietrich, should we finish the vote or?
Let's finish the vote.
Yeah.
Yep, you said it.
Yes.
Kathy, yes, Annie, yes.
Yes.
John, yes, okay. So now you make.
Jim Dietrich was going to step down, but apparently in the mid-80s, he's got nothing else to do with his time. And so Sarah came back to me. I know that John Benares, who agreed to stay on, did you touch base with him? All right, he's gonna stay on, so, and I think that when we have some new blood coming in and new volunteers, we ought to make arrangements for that.
Okay.
So I'll tender my resignation formally or something. For case of this, is this it?
You're right.
It's done. I'm on.
Effective July 1.
That's effective July.
Well, we're Wednesday night, right? All right.
Yeah, you're on Wednesday night.
Would you consider staying on as staying as the
Yes.
liaison between the select board and the?
Yeah.
That would be great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. So,
So terrific. Congratulations. I hope you both enjoy it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome to stay, but not required. Okay. Are a couple minutes ahead of the schedule for the Mascanoma Park presentation. Can we take up the consent agenda? Are there anything that we'd like to remove from the consent agenda?
So I will just note that under the special events, we don't have everything finalized with the proposed movie filming.
Okay,
Things are still a little, they're not nailed down.
Okay.
That's often the case, it seems, with filming. So we don't need formal approval, but I guess it'd be helpful to know if you are in favor of the basic concept, and staff can continue to work out the final details.
okay, so the question, we will remove that from the consent agenda. For the rest of the consent agenda, are there any questions?
I just had one on the concerts, the Manchester Essex Performing Arts. I didn't see the specified start and end times on the music. There was they were using music amplification, and so we just gotta double check the start and end time on that, because I think those fields were blank.
Yeah, I thought they. It was, actual hours of the event, 11 to 12.
I'm sorry, that's the
That's the
Sawyer,
one.
that's the public
Okay, fine.
library. It was the other one that I saw the start and end times. I know the overall event was a certain amount of time, but it was the music piece.
Okay,
Just would like some clarification on that page that is. Yeah, it was,
So I think they're suggesting the end time is 8 and then clean up from 8 to 9.
Yeah, historically, it's been the same hours as the regular.
yeah, I can't even read the start time. Okay, so the start time, and so if the end time is 8 o'clock for the amplified
Yes.
sound.
That's when sound ends, and then they would, so that's when the concert ends, and then they would use the last hour
Okay,
for cleanup.
okay.
as long as that's the last, as long as that's the end time.
Okay. Is there a motion to accept the consent agenda with the exception of the filming at Singing Beach? Second, Jeff?
Yes.
Yeah.
Brian, that's Kathy.
Yes.
Answered yes.
John, yes.
Okay. Now, what is the feeling of the board on the subject of the filming at Singing Beach? John?
So far, so good.
Okay.
I'm fine with what I have read, and person that is representing the filming folks has obviously done this many times. She knew all the questions would be coming up. So I'm okay with everything I've seen so far. When you say something is not there,
The date isn't nailed down.
okay,
That's the main thing.
all right.
Yeah, I was gonna ask about the date, like, what are we,
It was 1 day deal,
2 days.
so maybe it was 2 days. Yeah, it was in there, but that might be moved around a
Monday,
little bit.
Tuesday though. Tuesday.
Right, so they were talking about later in the week, and we are saying, no, it's better to be early in the week, just in terms of beach use.
Yes, no, Monday, Tuesday, the best days.
Non-holiday Monday and Tuesday is preferred.
Who's responsible for police details?
They would be,
They will be, okay.
yes.
And following up on Muffin's email,
Mhm.
say, the discussion with the Park and Rec meeting last week, was the desire to keep a partial, some of the funds that are paid to the town, keep it. Approximately revolving.
Mhm.
To help fund maybe the fireworks or whatever, so that's the only thing that we discussed. And then also the rest of the board.
Want to discuss that now?
Or no, we don't know what the plan, do you know what the plan, is gonna be with the team?
No.
No, we don't have a final. So let's let us.
Let's let that ride.
had a question on the graphics that were provided. There's a green box, a couple of pictures, it says a few hours. And then there's a red box, and I didn't see an annotation.
So the red box is where the majority of the filming would take place.
Okay. And would the beach be completely off limits to
people can,
Just-
keep,
Yeah,
people
what's the end?
can
Okay.
traverse.
Okay, so it's just that section.
Yes,
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And will Amy Adams be there?
Okay.
I would assume so.
Okay, so I gather that the board is generally in favor of proceeding with this.
Yeah, we'll keep working on it and try
And
to
it's
get
something to
a
put on
final
our agenda
proposal
for
for
next
you.
time.
Yep.
Very good. Okay, I think we're ready for the, Mascanoma Park presentation.
Okay, I know that we have members of the team from Fuss and O'Neill. They were the consulting engineers who helped put together the 3-day charrette that was held a couple months ago now. And that was the basis of the ideas that they will be presenting this evening. And so why don't I turn it over to Alex Maxwell, who's the project coordinator down at Fuss and O'Neill. And Alex, so you probably want to share the screen. Let me
Yeah,
do
that'd be
that.
great. Thanks, Greg.
Okay,
Great. Just get that up here. Hopefully that's showing now. Ian, can I get a thumbs up that you're seeing it on your end? Excellent. Great, great. Well, thanks, Greg, and thanks, members of the board and members of the community. I'm here with my colleague Ian Law from Fuss and O'Neill, and we're here to report out on, as Greg mentioned, some of the work product developed as part of our 3-day community visioning workshop and design charrette. So before we get started, I know some faces are familiar in the crowd there, but for the new faces, I'm Alex Maxwell. I'm a senior environmental planner and engineer with Fuss and O'Neill. I have with me Ian Law, who I'll have introduced himself. Ian, you want to say a quick hello?
Hi, everyone. Ian Law. I'm a senior landscape architect with Fuss and O'Neill, and really excited to be here and share the workshop results with you.
Great. Thanks, Ian. All right, so I will just flip through these here. So this evening, hopefully you're seeing the overview slide. Are you seeing that, Ian, or did it change screens?
I am seeing it, yes.
Great. So we'll just give a little bit of context behind this project and why we did this workshop here, and then explain a little bit more about what we were up to over that early part of May with members of the community, members of the design team, and then the real highlight will be showing some of the conceptual design alternatives that were developed here. But just to give a little bit of the context behind the project, the town, as many may know, did receive for the 2nd year in a row a grant from the Office of Coastal Zone Management, or CZM, known as a Coastal Resilience Grant. It's actually a 2-year grant. And the purpose of this 2-year grant, which started this year and will extend into next year, is really to begin implementing some of the actions developed in last year's Coastal Vulnerability Action Plan that was also developed with funding from CZM, and that we also partnered with the town and members of the community to develop. So this is really the first steps in beginning to implement some of the near-term actions identified in that plan. This is actually an excerpt from the plan, one of our graphical scenarios for near-term actions to address coastal resilience along the inner harbor.
Alex, I apologize to interrupt.
We're
not seeing that, Alex.
You're
Oh,
not
thanks.
seeing that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just seeing the cover page.
I gotcha. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah.
Just see.
Oh, sorting that, could we reduce the size of and push it down?
Ian, are you now seeing overview?
I'm seeing the overview, yeah.
Okay,
About the
great.
project, yeah.
All right,
there we
here's
go.
about the project, and then this is the slide I just
Yeah, there we
ended
go.
on. So, all right, thank you for letting me know. it's like you're juggling multiple screens, and I'm trying to keep the faces on the screen as well. But yeah, flag me down if you see that happening again. But this was the excerpt I was talking about here, and I just want to briefly call out this area in the yellow. That was what was identified in last year's plan to begin as part of a near-term action to explore adaptations to accelerate accommodate future recreational and programming and floodable zones within Masconomo Park, along with actually elevating some of the critical infrastructure, namely the generators at the fire and police stations, which CZM is also funding as part of this 2-year grant. But we're really going to focus on what we did with the Masconomo Park exploration here through the community planning and design charrette. So over the course of, it was actually from April 30th to May 2nd, which seems like a little bit of a lifetime ago. It's hard to believe we were wearing big winter jackets with almost 100-degree weather on the horizon. But we did get a number of folks out over the 3 days to conduct a site walk of Masconomo Park, provide us feedback on how the park has been used historically, what's working well with the park, what's maybe posing a challenge, especially when looking at some of the flood mapping that was developed as part of last year's planning study of the entire inner harbor. And then our job was really to kind of take all that feedback in and then beginning to visualize some of the alternatives being discussed and what was really possible with the site. The images that you see in the left, that's part of what we call the walk shops. That's where we're walking the site, listening to folks, taking down feedback. We had boards with us with some of the flood mapping. And then on the evening of the second day, we had a pin up out in front of Town Hall with a couple of the early sketch designs to really just get reactions from folks and hearing what they liked, what they didn't like about the different types of alternatives. And we had some precedent image boards. And then on the evening of the third night, we also had a report out, kind of a town hall style report out. But this 3 days really all started with a little bit more of an exploration of the sort of history of Masconomo Park, stretching back to the Olmsted vision for the park, which is actually on the screen here, which you can kind of see a lot of the same design elements still incorporated in the park at present day here, minus most notably the parking at the point, but definitely the big open space, the winding pathways, the connection to the water, all of those still really important. And concurrently, we also look back and credit to Nate for helping to pull these, Nate DeRosiers, who's on the line, to help pull these images in as well that give us a little bit of the history, looking back at Masconomo Park over the years. This is from approximately 1900, where of course you don't see much of a park, but you definitely see the salt marsh, beach road in the middle of the photo, and then of course the outer harbor. Beginning around the 1930s, you start to see some of that Olmsted vision take shape, the band shell and some of the pathways. Certainly no parking out at the front, but connection to the water through a pier. And then stretching into the 50s, now we start to see some of the parking out at the point, and interestingly enough, room to launch boats and access to the water out by the point as well. You can also see the culvert along Beach Street that's open in this photo. And of course, those familiar with the site will know that's actually got a tide gate on it, and it's closed up now. Here in the 1960s photo, you see actually some of that recreational programming taking place on the open field with the baseball field there. And then in the 80s, just kind of another view where you see that baseball field still there, some of the parking out at the end, and then Masconomo today, which looks kind of largely the same, with some site improvements with the play structures and some of the improved parking structures as well. So we looked at Masconomo today through this lens, but also through the lens of what we looked at in last year's planning study, which was all really focused on the vulnerability to coastal flood events. And these are actually images from the January flood events, where you can see large swaths of Masconomo Park that get flooded in such coastal storm events. But we also heard and have learned through also the previous modeling of the site that even tidal inundation can become a nuisance on the site when you have large tidal events. So it's not just storm events, which you're seeing in the images here, but even at present, you're getting quite a bit of coastal inundation in wet areas on the site. So taking all of that information on board and coupling it with this image that you see here, this is actually another excerpt from last year's plan, which just shows the extent of tidal flooding out in the future. Here, the darker blue, kind of coloring in the harbor here, that's the tidal extents out to 2030. And then the kind of royalish blue, not the lightest, but kind of that interim blue there, that represents what will be the mean high water mark out in 2050. And you can see that encroaching in on the southern portions of Masconomo, where actually you're already seeing parts of that get wet in coastal storm events and some of those large tidal events. And then out to 2070 is where you're seeing that lightest blue extent there. So the real takeaway from this was that, this place will flood. How would the community like it to look potentially in the future as it phases from, the park that we know today to potentially something that looks, quite different in the future, especially as you look as far out as 2070 and recognize the degree of flooding that you will likely see on the park. So here's just a look at some of the images from the walk shop here. We did kind of a word cloud study of all the different things we heard about. We heard a lot about trees, but also wanting open space. We heard about the various events happen on the park. We heard about the working waterfront component. We heard about the need for bathrooms, expanding some of the play areas, and just kind of took all this in and used it to develop some of the conceptual designs that Ian will actually talk us through here and present one at a time, just the different alternatives that were developed. So Ian, do you want to step us through this, and I can advance the slides as you say next?
Sure, perfect. So obviously the first concept is do nothing, right? Continue operation and maintenance as usual. This next one we think is really important, and that is, replacing park infrastructure in kind, because now that we have all this data, it's going to be really difficult to fund future park improvements through grants by just putting things back exactly where they were when they're so vulnerable to current and future flooding, and not really planning for the park, this park's transition into the future. So for the purposes of our workshop, we moved forward with not moving forward with the do nothing concept. We'll leave that up to you. Alex, I'm just going to spend a few minutes on this existing slide again. Some of the things that I've wanted to mention that we think kind of held true as themes through all three concepts in different degrees and different geometries. One, we really wanted to honor the Olmstedian forms. We, no matter what the improvements that we propose, we still want it to look and feel like Masconomo Park, and hopefully just a better, more resilient version. We wanted to really improve both the visual and physical connection to the water. Something to point out, Alex, if you can kind of show your mouse, sure. Is just, the parking is right at the prime view of the park. And we don't think that was Olmsted's vision. We understand that the functionality of it. So exploring options for how we could relocate the parking potentially, when it's time, it's at the end of its life, potentially to a more resilient location, or a location that lets you take full advantage of all of the, to maximize the park's potential, is something that was sort of a guiding principle for us. We heard a lot about the need for flexibility, making a park that's going to be usable for all ages and abilities. So that was something that was also a guiding focus for us. And of course, it had to have a focus on resilience to maximize the life of the park. But none of the concepts were a keep the water out methodology. We do not believe that you'll be able to get it permitted. And so we wanted to demonstrate park enhancements that we thought were resilient, that would maximize the life of the park, but be a realistic transition to what we know is coming, by 2070. So the other thing that we'll notice on all of our plans, we'll see that 2050 mean higher high water extents, and our different plans integrate that level of resilience to varying degrees. So with that, Alex, we can jump right into concept one. As I mentioned before, one of the things that was really kind of guiding a lot of the concepts was, what do we do with the parking? How aggressive can we be? So in this first concept, this is the closest to kind of the existing of what you have, but what we did is we moved the parking further away from the point, a little closer to the playground, like one full 60-foot tray. And we also peeled it back closer to kind of the harbor to open up the visual and physical connection to the waterfront from the main part of the park. So that was a goal in all of our concepts. This one, we did it a little bit. So this was sort of the lightest touch. In this particular case, this reconfigured parking, we actually added some parking kind of adjacent to where the working waterfront parking is, and then kind of just massage that existing lot to again open up the point. That resulted in a net loss of 4 or 5 spaces. So just being completely open about that, this version does lose a few spaces. We've elevated the bandstand. So where number 4 is basically the existing bandstand location, we've primarily kept that location for all of them because that is the existing high point within the park. So a slight elevation would maximize the bandstand's resilience into the future to the greatest extent possible. So we think it's in the right spot. We think doing a slight elevation and using the landscape around it to create a nice accessibility to it makes some sense, and it would extend its life for as long as possible. We did hear the need to expand the park, the playground area. So that is reflected. It introduced some shade, some accessible surfacing. A lot of Olmsted plans always have primary green space and secondary lawn areas, so we were able to maintain that along with a large event lawn. One of the key things we've heard, which all the concepts reflect, is taking away the backstop of the ball field and letting that open space be more flexible. Not to say that you couldn't still have youth sport practices or games in that field, but in a little less formal way, but really to maximize the potential and flexibility of that green space. Number 8 that you see here, as you can see, that 2050 mean higher high water extent really penetrates into that green space, in the next 25 years. So we thought about adding an elevated boardwalk section in that area that's really the most vulnerable to allow that tidal water to pass under and let that boardwalk actually become a feature of the park where you'd be passing over water, and make that piece and that connectivity more resilient. Number 9 is another feature that we've done on every concept to varying degrees, and that is really a pulling back of the point to make it a habitat exploration area. So to have physical access to little tidal pools and elements that can be done in a safe way, but really letting the water be a future feature of the park, and just adding kind of that level of ecology, as well as resilience. It would still be structurally sound to be kind of defense out at that point, but done in a more natural way. And provide some overlook seating out at that point. Really taking back that point is a key aspect to all the concepts. And lastly, the future connection to the Harbor Walk from the working pier there. We go to the next slide. This kind of shows you how that peeling back of the point would work. Again, each concept does it in varying degrees, but essentially the red dashed line represents the existing grade of what the point does. So this area here will be where the parking is, with overlook opportunities there, but then the ability, as the tide rises and then recedes, to leave some water behind and some accessibility to get you all the way out at the point, but really fun exploration area. That's a feature in all of the concepts. And this is demonstrating that inundation from that 2050 mean higher high water, to really show how, you know, that boardwalk connection can be made, but keeping the core elements of the park. One of the features I forgot to mention was the bathroom in the harbor master's office, which would be located in this plan in number 3. So with that, I'll move on to concept B. Again, we let parking drive kind of the beginning of each concept. So in this case, we've relocated all the parking in this area here. And this one, we have a net loss of 0. So we basically had a wash of the parking count. The Harbor Master restroom building would be located in this area. The expanded playground zone, elevated bandstand, basically in its current location, big event lawn, kind of secondary lawns, and then similar to the other one, we've got the large elevated boardwalk connection to account for that tidal inundation. We've peeled back the point again, created some interesting overlook areas, the connection to the future harbor walk, and in this one, number 11, that would be you know, an overlook lawn space, kind of again give you more flexibility, but right out at that premium view. Again, you can see the extent of the 2050 inundation and how that boardwalk piece could become a really nice feature to allow the water to kind of pass under and still have the bulk of your park elements in resilient locations. And lastly, concept C, which we believe was, from the workshop standpoint, ended up to be the preferred option. This locates the bulk of the parking parallel to Beach Street while still maintaining vehicular access for the working waterfront, as well as offering a few temporary parallel spots off to the side of the point to still be able to kind of finish your coffee or take in that view or unload your vehicle to take out to your boat, to transfer to the dinghy dock. And again, a lot of the same elements. This parking configuration actually has a gain of about 10 spaces in total. So that was an interesting component. Other features, the bathroom and harbor master's office is located right there at the beginning with a pretty good view of the harbor. Similarly, we've expanded the playground areas, but also we're able to offer a smaller tot lot. That was some of the feedback we got, that it could be great to kind of have a larger kid, older kid playground and a smaller kid playground, but in close proximities for parental supervision. Again, the big open event lawn, elevated bandstand, but really this one really nicely gives the park kind of back to maximizing its waterfront by pushing the bulk of the vehicles to the back. Again, opening up, peeling back that point, offering some interesting seating options to take in the view. And then if we look at the 2050 mean higher high water, what this one really does, probably the best of all of them, it pulls a lot of the internal walkways inland out of that inundation line. So at least over the next 25 years, the bulk of your park elements are still relatively resilient, and going to maximize their life for as long as possible. But the other thing that Concept C does probably better than the rest is it really gives you a transition to the long term. And if we look out to 2070 and understanding that in 2070, the park's going to have twice a day complete inundation, we know that Beach Street at some point will need to be elevated, and potentially that offers the opportunity for that adjacent parking to be elevated if that was something that the town thought was a good idea. In addition, you could elevate the working pier and the restroom and the harbor master's office so that those could stay resilient, while the rest of the park, we would extend the boardwalk all the way over to the working pier. But the park by 2070 would really need to transition to a nature preserve. That could still be very dynamic and interesting, but it's just the realities of the science. But to make this important landscape still something that's a valuable asset to the community. Alex, feel free to jump in if I mixed anything, trying to get through it as quickly as possible so we can answer as many questions.
Yeah, no, you're doing a great job, Ian. I think the only thing to add is that by having some of that enabling infrastructure with the boardwalk and pathways in place earlier as part of maybe a phased approach to the transition, it would make the permitting, long-term permitting of those areas that have already been, previously established that much easier out into the future. But I thought you did a nice job explaining that. And then this, shows some of that mean higher high water extents with an elevated Beach Street here.
And one last point that I forgot to mention is, some of these moves, for example, making the big move to the parking, theoretically that could be done in a phased time. Say your existing parking area gets to the end of its life, and rather than having to reconstruct it in its existing location, maybe that would be the time to make that big move and some of these other improvements. So we, look forward to helping you figure out the best way to phase it to make this as a reality and try to maximize the life of this beautiful park.
Thank you. Are there questions from the board? John?
Yeah, so thanks for the review. Very, very good. I had seen it before once. I was involved a little bit with some of the walkarounds. I've got a question. I guess it applies to A, B, and C. What can you tell me exactly what the mitigation initiatives that would be involved in these? And you're showing right there the boardwalk. That's one. You're not proposing to elevate the park, so the park's gonna, with raising waters, it's gonna flood whenever it's gonna flood. But what are the initiatives that are really responding to or providing adaptation or mitigation to rising waters? I saw you wanted to raise the bandstand.
Yeah, the bandstand is a big one, and as Alex said, the boardwalk,
Yeah.
out on this, if you go back to that last image, Alex. Yeah, the boardwalk that's extending, out, running page right to page left. That is currently where that 2050 line comes in the most. So that would certainly be one of the first major mitigation moves. Because if not, those existing pathways on that section of the park are gonna surely get undermined and be a constant maintenance nuisance. Also, the peeling back of the point, will naturally armor the point while still providing a feature. Whereas that area is also gonna be particularly vulnerable, and ultimately lead to, the lifespan of that zone, coming to an end faster than it normally would.
But that's not changing elevation. That's still where it's at, and the raising waters are gonna be wherever they're gonna be.
Yeah, we're not holding back the sea with any
No.
of these alternatives.
Okay.
Yeah, that's important to
Yeah,
mention.
This, the concept C, which is depicted in these three, in these 3D illustrations, is the most aggressive in pulling back the internal walkways so that they're at least beyond that 2050 line of daily tidal inundation. Whereas before, those are going to get impacted, much sooner. And
All right, and in concept C, you mentioned possibly raising the parking, which I look as a mitigation issue. We look out our back window here, that's a problem a couple of times a year.
Right.
I don't know where those
Sure.
cars go, to be honest.
Yeah, but just to drive the point home, that the elevation of the parking lot would actually be contingent upon a future possible elevation of Beach Street as well, and you could tie into those grades. So that's where that really does become more of a viable option.
Well, when you say elevation, is this like 1 or 2 feet?
Yeah, it depends on where along Beach Street, but yeah, you're talking several feet of elevation that you need
Several is
to.
more than 1 or 2. I mean, I
So-
would say 1 foot, because maybe that really is the difference right now between.
It's not
Letting your
one,
car
it's
away
not
after
1
water
foot,
not.
I can tell you. Yeah, we have it detailed in last year's plan,
Okay.
as far as those elevations, but it is several feet in some of those low-lying areas of Beach Street, both here by the culvert, and then, as you move down Beach Street past Tappan, out towards Singing Beach, there's another, saddle point in there that you need to address with several feet of elevation as well.
Okay.
We're running short of other questions from the board.
I think the presentation was excellent and they answered a lot of my questions along the way.
I'm uneasy about having parking right along Beach Street. Because although the park is fairly heavily used, there are lots of other parks in town that are also heavily used. And more people drive by there, and destroying the view from Beach Street doesn't, by replacing it with parked cars or hedges, doesn't seem to me like a good plan.
I like that.
Okay,
Only because I think it gives us an unbroken view, okay, as you're looking towards the harbor without a field of parked cars there. And I think that it is Beach Street, it is a street, and pulling on and off of, I think from a safety point, pulling in and parking as opposed to just driving around, it's, might be
okay.
blocking. I just think that concept C looks like it's gonna be forever. It's a great look. That's what's my.
So I had a question. When you come into Masconomo Park now, on the left-hand side, isn't there a strip of conservation land there now? Or no? Is that wrong?
When you say conservation land,
On the left-hand side coming in, isn't some of that land tied up or no?
I'm aware, yeah.
No, I had a look at the GIS maps, and that's all this town land and not,
That's my understanding.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes, well,
Isabella Bates, 2 Masconomo Street. I went to the final presentation and saw the A, B, and C, and I have been doing a Tai Chi class in the rotunda. And so I've been imagining and walking around this. And what I really love about approaching this is we're not being ostriches and putting our head in the sand and saying this isn't going to happen. It is going to happen. And I really quite love the elevated walkway idea. But one thing they did not mention, which is that by 2070, because of the ocean inundation, there will be no more trees because they will have all been taken out by salt. And therefore it will be much more of a kind of swampy, grassy area like this. And so it will be quite transformed, but it is an entirely new adventure with the elevated walkway that continues to give us recreational space and stuff like that. And I truly love the idea of getting rid of the parking lot at the end. I know going by on Beach Street, nice to look over, but much better to walk out onto the park and have an unobstructed view of the harbor. As I've been living in the park with this idea, it seems better and better. Thank you.
I'll just quickly add, if you want to get a look at what it will look like in the future, you can point your phone at this QR code and it'll point you right into the rotunda there, and you can actually zoom around on your phone while folks are making additional comments.
Becky Jakes, 22 Forster Road. And I wanted, when did the town, do we know when the town actually started using Masconomo as playing fields,
So they showed some of that history at the beginning.
which I missed?
I want to say as early as the 30s, did we see
I
it?
think they showed it.
Yeah.
If you want, I think they,
I think
Great.
it was the next one.
Yeah, so Greg, we have an open field at 34, and then in the 50s is when we saw just a little bit of a play field. It's actually kind of hidden from view, but as you move into the 60s, that's where you actually see the formal baseball field.
I might suggest, I haven't seen it being used as a baseball field forever.
Exactly, that was
I
exactly.
think my son was the last one.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What do we need? What direction do they need?
Well, so their next steps are to finalize, I think Chuck has his hand up.
Yes.
Alex and his team needs to finalize the report. And obviously, if there is one particular option that is preferred over the other, that opinion would be helpful to be expressed in the report. If you're in a position to do so, to give that guidance.
Chuck.
Chuck?
Yeah, so my comment was kind of be in the same vein was, I don't think we need like any sort of decision. So I just want to make it clear to anybody in the crowd or, at home or, watching this a week from now, we're not going out to implement any of these things, tomorrow. There's certainly, good to get this feedback, and that I think was the bigger idea behind, talking to you guys tonight, getting this kind of historical record. When we look back in, a year or two, when we pull this off the shelf, what were we thinking at the time? And things changed, and we'll be picking it up to kind of bring it those next steps in kind of that time frame, because, we all know there's a lot going on. There's a lot of competing interests, both for this area and space, but also other projects that we have kind of in the pipeline for the harbor. So, all of those things are being taken into account, and we're kind of, this is just, making sure that we're bringing everything along in its due time. So I just want to make sure that was out there.
Sarah?
Sarah Creighton, 37 Proctor Street. I just wanted to echo Ann's point about, we're asked on the planning board all the time to look at views, and I think views from to Isabella's point, the views from inside the park are improved with the Plan C, but more people view it from along Beach Street. And I think the renderings to me look like Newport. I think having all that parking as the thing you see first is very antithetical to what we've been, the vision. And I don't have a good solution for maybe a hybrid And I also remain optimistic that maybe there would also be a building in that View corridor with the harbor masters and that we can, the community center or some other option will be found. And I know this isn't a decision about that, but I think that the view from Beach Street, currently doesn't see the cars, and I understand the problem with putting them on the point night. So, adding 10 cars, take those 10 cars away, at least for here. This isn't the best place for parking, nor do I have a solution for where to find 10 additional parking spaces, recognizing the challenge there. But, if we could, keep green space right up against Beach Street, at least for some of it, maybe push the parking off to the left or something. But the biggest comment on cell signaling is what it's gonna look like from 128. And here we have a iconic view out to the harbor where the first thing you look through is parked cars.
If I may suggest something to the board. The common thread of all of the plans is the boardwalk, and I believe the boardwalk is in the same place on all three.
Yes.
Generally, generally, yes.
I think we can all agree that the boardwalk would be an improvement and would give us something that is in place that we could maintain.
I was gonna go in the same direction, and I believe that, peeling back the point seems to be a theme on all three. Love that idea. The concept of, multiple, terraces, if you will, or multiple fields, a large one and one or two smaller ones, I think is great. Perhaps a solution or compromise on the parking can be found by, breaking it up a little bit, right? It would be wonderful to have 10 more spaces, but, there are other ways we may be able to accomplish that. And if you have a beautiful park, maybe more people will walk there. So I'm not opposed to parking directly on Beach Street, especially if one of the options we choose is, having the playgrounds near there. I think that's also convenient for families. You park, you have your playground there. If you just want to run in for a few minutes with the kids and let them blow off steam, that's nice to have the parking and the playground right there. So I think there's opportunities for compromise, but I think you're correct. If we could focus on agreeing on some of the common elements, and then what I'd like Fuss and O'Neill to do is help us understand the phases of the project, not sequentially, but so much as what are the things that we could do separately, right? And then when we get together with Chuck and FinCom and trying to figure out the financials, we'll have multiple pieces represented.
Probably some sort of stepwise.
Exactly. So that's what I'd like to get out of this next presentation, is what are the multiple pieces and rough costs, so we can figure that into our planning.
No, I think with regard to the parking, maybe there's some sort of a blend between concept B and concept C. I think that's what Kathy was kind of getting into. You have a little bit that goes along the water's edge and then just go up Beach Street a little bit. Frankly, the best view of Beach Street is the further out you go, because there are fewer obstructions and you really see the tidal area. Once you start to get into trees, you can't see anywhere near as much.
But you see green.
You see green. So.
Okay, is that sufficient direction?
Yeah, Alex, your team, you're getting enough feedback here?
Yeah, this is really helpful, and we just really appreciate the time. And I do see Nate's hand raised. I don't know if you want to get him in there, Greg.
Nate?
Yep. So I was just going to say that, so we currently have CPC funding to evaluate kind of the next phase of the current walkways. And, hearing there does seem to be, a lot of positive support for the, an elevated walkway. I think where I'm thinking is that we could take that, this kind of support and start vetting out the walkway and using that CPC funding to determine, what's going to be required. It is going to be, somewhat of a permitting heavy lift to get, if we do a pile supported walkway. The benefit of, doing pile supports is that the initial permitting would be the heaviest lift. And then in future years, when we have to say raise the walkway, as water comes up, it would be a much less heavy lift on the permitting. So if that's something we want to do, in the near term, we could use that CPC funding to start that effort of the design, layout, and potentially permitting for that type of a walkway.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're a little bit behind, and I'd like to get started on the wayfinding, if we may. So thank you. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names.
Alex,
Alex,
Alex and Ian.
Alex, and Ian. Very nice presentation.
Thank you as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Great. Okay. Marlene, you have your presentation on your laptop?
I do. May I share your paper with you? Just use my mouse. Thank you. Right, if I could use the screen.
All right, you should be able to
Great.
share your screen there.
And given that we're 10 minutes behind, you want me to carve 10 off?
Just be sure to
We
leave
can.
time for people to comment.
Plenty of time for them to comment.
And we have all read all of
The
this.
deck, yes.
So,
Okay.
go ahead.
So, hello, everybody. And I see that we have Mark Faberman, our consultant online, as well as Lauren from Stock Exchange, who was part of the team. There's Jim Brown, who was part of our team as well, as Rosemary is also here, part of our Historic District Commission, Becky and myself. We've got other team members, Beth Bravo by the Sea, who's not here right now, but she was a willing participant. So with that, I will give myself a share. Let's see, it looks like we're still disabled.
No, you should be co-host. The share screen option. Yep.
Host has disabled screen sharing
Could you take your computer over?
and give it to him.
Yeah.
What we can in the deck.
Actually, I think if someone who knows how to do this, we're looking at it, might be easier.
Well, the deck is in our presentation.
It's in there.
So
I mean,
can't
yeah,
Greg
he's got
or
it.
Yeah, you
or
can pull it
Debbie
up.
just share it?
It's got it in a PDF.
I don't know why it's always shares.
Your co-host.
Did you make me the co-host? Because I'm right here on 1626. I'm on the wrong Zoom. I'm on one of the other town Zooms, 16176, not Marlene Dolan. That, if that's on, that happens to be my husband. Embarrassingly.
Okay.
Yeah, that could be it. So 16176.
That's what you need to be a co.
Okay, yeah, it solves it.
That would explain it.
Sorry about that, guys. I'll make it up. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, now you.
Right on. Okay, what do you know?
Excellent.
So, hello and welcome. I've got a small deck here for you to look at. It's basically a deck that's separated into three parts. Part one is kind of just gives you the context of why we're here at all. Why did we end up with a wayfinding presentation? Part two is meeting our commitment of having two different options for the town to consider if they do choose to go with a wayfinding solution for the town for our visitors. And part three is just initial recommendation on 6 signs that we would recommend you step into the water with. So those are the 3 parts of the presentation. I'm going to zoom right through
all of the upfront stuff, and if there's questions about that, we can,
People can just speak up if that's all right. Raise your hand.
right, okay, so. So, this basically is just a screenshot of a report for those that are new to this board, that was presented in 2023 by the Civic Space Collaborative. And they had looked at a number of things for our town, one of which was wayfinding. And you can see that in the yellow. So this presentation is specifically reporting on that one bullet. The main things that they recommended that we solve for is, you know, people traveling in from 128 who don't know the place. There really is no signage on how to get to the town center. And I will say that municipal parking lots and the pathway from town, I'm just gonna skip around a little bit here, are things that people wanted highlight. And I'll just continue. Right, okay, so this is.
You can slow down just a little bit. It's
Oh,
okay.
Okay. Oh, is up front. Is there any questions on this page? I don't want to do a death march through this, guys. Okay, so I did want you to see this page because the key thing that we wanted to make sure you were aware of is that because this is signage that has to do with wayfinding, we needed to talk with our business owners in town, of which we did, and other people. And we got a great amount of feedback from them that was quite helpful in formulating our opinion. And thank you to Beth and Lauren for that. So 4 things here. So the target population for this are visitors to Manchester by the Sea. We were due to have it done in June. We did it in 5 months. And the deliverable is 2 options and a draft plan. What is out of scope for this was broader community involvement, meaning let's go shop this out to the community, see what they like. We used this group that we brought together as the shop and Mark Faberman as our expert. And then we all know that many people feel we have too many signs in town. We're oversigned. And if you are of that opinion, we would recommend that there's something done about which signs we should remove before we add more in or concurrently. Right. Okay, so these next few pages are kind of, Mark wanted me to show you kind of a quick sweep of how did we finally get to our opinion, and he asked the whole group to go through 1 word, 2 words, 3 words in terms of what describes Manchester. Then he asked us about colors. He asked us about symbols or landmarks, and you can see Rotunda, Town Common, Coolidge Point. And then he asked, what do you think about branded street furniture? And for the most part, the group feels that there's too many benches already, and there's not a lot of room for street art or street furniture. Finally, these are just in our new planning. Is Mark here?
Yes.
Hi, I've never seen you in person. So Mark took this away, these aspirational things. These were things that came up in the meeting. They're not part of our scope, but he took these away to do what he thinks is right. So with that, Rosemary, you're gonna be our, you're gonna be the reasoning behind the choices of these 2 options.
So we looked, Mark was very generous in showing us many communities' options, how they chose from their history, from their architecture, from their landscape, emblematic signs. And he encouraged us to look in our own community and find things that you've shown on the previous list, the harbor, the common, Rotunda. And we all really gravitated toward the Rotunda as an iconic and really favored symbol of this community, more than something like the Arbella. Well, we have that on the town seal, and we looked at the weather vane on top of the library as potential. We really found that this spoke to everybody, and we were unanimous in choosing this as the sign, the symbol.
So this is option one. It's called a color rendering of the building. Mark also developed, this is what is called a family of elements. How's that for new terminology that we learned along the way? And, you know, to the far left is typically what you might see for entering the town type of sign, maybe on 128 way up there. You know, that's this is who we are. And then you can see the various other kinds of signs that one might choose to locate in town. So that's option one, color. So this is what we call a silhouette rendering. Same concept, it's the rotunda. And we wanted to choose this option just because it was still the rotunda, but also if the town felt that it wanted to have something more graphical like this, or wanted to use this on people's shirts, or, you know, the whatever, it's a less you know, there's other ways to go. And some people really would prefer less color. So I will tell you that the team personally like number one the best, and that's why they put that first. But we think this is also a very good option. So let me just pause there and take comments, concerns, and accusations.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So we have our professional designer on the call.
Yes, we
right?
do.
So, both of the signs, in my opinion, they look great, both options, they look terrific. I think we need to remember that there is a functional reason why we are looking at having signs. So if I'm driving, I don't have a lot of time to look at the words, you know, so my question of the professional is which option is best for quick reading of the words? Is one better than the other? Because I'd like to focus on function for a minute.
So before we talk about function, I'd like to talk about aesthetics as well as function. And in both these cases, the branding exercise we went through, and even when we talked about aspirational ideas, led us to want to do something very, very elegant. And I feel that what we've come up with really reflects of what Manchester by the Sea is. And in terms of readability, they both are readable. It is a quick read. We will limit any kind of directional elements, that is to 4. And then we'll have a hierarchy of signs in terms of sizes that will get you from one place to the other. Does that answer the question?
So you're saying there really is no difference, and, you know, if I'm driving by a sign at 25 miles an hour, I'm not gonna absorb the information on one side versus another better?
Probably not.
That was my question.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I've got another question. So are we looking at these signs in the context of people in a car and not people walking? This is all.
No, both.
Both.
They're both.
So there's different element signs.
But the family of elements allows you to have more that are pedestrian oriented as opposed to vehicular oriented.
Okay, well, vehicle can always be read by a pedestrian, but it doesn't work the other way around.
True.
So all of these are expected to be read by people in a car.
Right.
Somewhat, you know.
Not all.
Not
So
all, but some.
for
All right.
example, when you look at these family, I'm making it smaller so you can see the comparison
sure.
between the two. So the two right here that are, you know, I'm circling, those are really for pedestrians. So for example, if we chose to do one between the walkways, we might choose something smaller like this because you're walking. We might choose one, you know, those are the decisions you'd have to go through. But for the most part, Mark, we had said, because we asked this question, all signs would be able to be read by pedestrians, and except for a couple, they would all be read by vehicular due to the proportions of the sign.
Even the small ones that Marlene circled there, if that had a P on it and an arrow, you could see that easily from a car. And parking, finding parking is an issue clearly that was discussed at length.
Can you see the silhouette of the person here? These are some pretty large heights as well as dimensions. This is a 2 scale.
Thank you.
Becky?
Just, Becky Jakes, I was part of the wayfinding group. The questions asked about, readability and size, we definitely went over all of that. And tried to make sure that we were primarily addressing cars initially, so that it's more for people who are not familiar. Would you agree, Rosemary? with
Yeah,
that?
and really to me, a lot of this was about public safety. As you drive into the town, the roads turn, they get narrow, there's parked cars, there's pedestrians, there's people with strollers, there's people on bikes. And you don't want people looking at their phones for directions. You want people looking at the road and seeing a sign that confirms what they may have seen on their phone earlier on their journey. But when they get into the carry downtown, they're really not looking at their phones or their GPS. They're looking for a sign to give them that last mile, last yard destination.
So the first time that I ever came to Manchester by the Sea was several decades ago, and it was by train. And I had to ask, which way was it to Singing Beach, so I could walk with my towel down to the beach. But these family of elements will reinforce direction, reinforce a sense of arrival, and reinforce a sense of place.
Yes.
I'm very appreciative of having these two options side by side, because the left one, the color one, I find way more welcoming and friendly. The other one even looks downright ominous.
There's a certain Darth Vader look.
I find the one on the left to be very, and this is a funny word, but harbor and beachy to me.
Yeah.
As well, there's a joy to it that the other one doesn't necessarily express in the same way.
Yeah, I really like the color rendering, but I can see where the silhouette might work. Maybe not on signage, but others,
For
like
other
you're
things,
saying,
yeah.
other things, sure, that you don't want to print full color. So will we be retiring some signage to new signage?
That's
No kidding. Jim Brown.
that's the goal in mind. Yes.
Yeah, okay, because.
We started looking at that. I think that was John, right, speaking. Jim Brown, part of the Downtown Improvement Committee, and I was kind of involved with this, but we did start looking at that. I have a few photos that I've taken already. Our goal would be at some point to make a presentation to the selectmen with some suggestions for signage that may be redundant or we may be able to get rid of. Also, just a comment on the walking versus driving. The placement of these signs will also determine what type of sign. So as you get closer to town, where there'll be more pedestrians, that's where we decided to use, we would use the smaller signs you'll see as the presentation goes on. But as you're driving into town, that's where the larger signs, you'll be driving faster, and there'll be fewer pedestrians potentially. So we also kept that in mind.
Let's continue. Okay. So the next piece was, what are all the types of, we went through, what are the things that we might want to point out on signs? And let me minimize this. Thank you, Rosemary. So on the left are there's two columns, which we chose the column left as things that we would pick up as a wayfinding team, and not get into all the other things on the right. And I won't walk you through chapter and verse as to why we decided as such, but again, knowing there are so many signs in town, what are the least few things that will answer, and Lauren, you can speak to this, what our patrons, our shop owners are finding, which is people get off the train and they actually do not know how to get to Singing Beach. They do not know where they might get something to eat. unless they're staring at Bravo, thank God. Or they don't know that there's a Bluebird down the street because they think town ends at the top of the corner. So these are things that our, people visiting town, and we want to increase business for our shop owners. So we have 6 signs recommended for phase 1. And the first 2 basically are at one, this, if you can get a view of this, this is at the bottom of School Street coming off the 128 School Street exit. And this is at the bottom of Pine Street coming off the 128 exit. And we chose those 2 areas because those are basically the 2 heaviest trafficked places that people come into town who are visitors. People coming along 127 certainly, but they're probably more local. And this is your decision point for where to go. And so those are 2 places that we recommended.
So I can't read from here what you had on those signs.
I can tell you. Hold.
Is that in the table on the slide
Yes.
before? It's in the table on the
Yeah.
slide before that.
So at the Pine Street exit, we would point to the left for downtown parking, beach, and 1 to the right for Tux Point.
Okay.
That would take care of it. At the School Street at Junction of Central, it would be pointing to shops both ways, parking, beach, dining, and Tux Point. So there would be 5 on that kind of a sign. And what you're seeing here is these are what's called, I think, Mark, directory signs. So the most you can have on one of those is 6 without driving somebody crazy. Then the other major point that we picked is right in the middle of town, and it's hard to see this, but this is the Crosby's, the wall in front of Crosby's coming down Beach Street to town. And again, this is for people coming, in that, up front would be the same kind of thing. The beach, restrooms, shops, dining, etc. And we also have one right here in front of, in general, Mari and the water company that would catch people coming in on 127 to tell them which way to which.
And pedestrians.
And pedestrians, right. And then finally, we want to highlight the walkway between the parking lot of Town Hall and center of town so that people can know that it's fine to use that parking lot and get to town quickly. So those are the 6 signs. They're outlined in this deck right here to show you whereabouts they would go. And we did a general estimate of what that might cost. And it looks like it's about $4,000 to $5,000, but that just is a good estimate at this point. And I believe that's it.
To add to that estimate, installation may be additional depending on the sign fabricator and installation process. But those are pretty much up-to-date signage. This is a project that you can get very high visibility for. It's a capital project at a low budget that has the highest visibility. So it's an important project. Manchester by the Sea actually won a competition to get this consulting service from the state because it is the most desirable grant that communities apply for every year. So I just wanted you to know that
I
you're
think there was only
winners already.
There was only 6 chosen for this year. Is that right, Mark?
There were, I think there were 5 actually, yeah.
So we kind of lucked out. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I've got a question, and that's coming south on 127. I don't know what the signs are at Washington and Summer. In other words, people that don't know where they're going, are they directed to go down Washington and bypass? So the people that know where they're going are going down Summer in front of Crosby's. And they know where they're going, that's why they went that way.
Yes.
And the other people, I'm just wondering if there needs to be a sign in front of the realtor there because of the, that's a stop sign at the end of Washington. before you then merge onto Central. Or I guess it's Central, you're on Central.
I think Marlene
Right
has,
in front of what used to be North Coast.
I think Marlene.
Oh,
and
yeah,
Rosemary-
yeah, the Zax, the old Zax thing. Yes.
As it coming down 127 and keeping people off of that residential street
Right.
altogether.
We have a control
Well,
for
see,
that.
I don't know what signage it is there, and if you don't know the area, which way are you going? You're gonna barrel
Right.
left and go down the hill, or you're gonna go up Washington? I don't.
So we had,
The state has signed at 127 is going on Washington.
All right, something to think about.
but when we are making the sign that's coming in, sorry, we had a sign that was near the 1600 cemetery.
Yeah.
And we were gonna, because we don't wanna get them all jammed down the residential area, we were gonna point them down Summer to town so as to relieve our neighborhood.
Fine.
And then, John, to your point, we
Well,
were.
then you don't need the one sign at the end. You're gonna solve it up.
We did, yes. So I didn't know if you would like to have a sign at that location, but that's an option.
So, you mentioned driving, we've been talking a lot about this. What about the people coming off the train? Right now, they go straight to Bravo and ask directions. So I love all of what's been recommended thus far. I still don't see how any of these signs
Help that problem. It's funny you should say that. They don't, actually. And there's two ways we thought about solving for that. One is a concept that's in process right now, which is kind of like those walking maps that you can get as a tourist that shows what all that is, and they can get that online or their QR code, or it's pasted on the side of the community center or on the train station, so there'd be something there. And then another would be, we plop a sign somewhere right in that parking lot near the station.
I noticed that all of the other places where you put signs are public property.
Yes,
The train station is.
it's not ours to
The
pick,
train
right?
isn't ours, the parking lot isn't ours. The parking lot for the train isn't even ours.
Yeah.
Community centers.
Trick question.
Well, we did talk about phases because of the cost and the number of signs and the potential visual impact of having. I think we came up with 20 locations that we potentially could put signs.
And we carved it
And
10.
so it just seemed like a lot to start with 20 locations.
Yeah.
We had
Well, I think you could, set them up and take a look at what information's on them. I think your approach here that's being presented is very minimal. Most towns and cities would do 20 or 25 signs to begin with and remove a lot of the redundancy immediately. The worst example of a redundancy is in the town or city of Salem. And they have signs they put up every 5 years, but they never take down any of the old ones. So you have layers of signs historically placed there.
Reed Park was the other.
Yeah, Reed Park.
Yeah, for the boaters.
With the boat traffic.
Yeah. that's right.
Exactly.
About that.
And I think did we choose public dock as one, or the public? But we did talk about that. We did not choose the public boat launch or public dock. Okay.
But if you had.
But you can add a sign to have
Yes.
that one there, or
That's
have one that says museum and
Yes,
library
that's
too.
right.
I
We
mean,
could-
all these are possible, so.
That's
We-
the sign
we
you're
have a-
talking about are pedestrian. All the other ones really are largely driving.
Yeah.
For those of you that attended the quarterly Chamber of Business meeting last week, we discussed putting temporary sandwich boards with QR codes, a QR code at the docks and at the train station. And so we actually have that in process. We ordered the sandwich boards on Friday. I have a meeting tomorrow at the chamber to talk about a potential landing page or how we're gonna do that.
Thank you. Let's try and focus on what we're doing here rather than. what's
But
going
this
on.
might fall into that because I'm gonna sit down with Marlene and suggest that is part of the signage. We've done a lot of work and spent a lot of money at directing people to the docks to come into town. And it would be nice if they could get off of the docks and know where to go. And the same with the train right now. So I think it is part of this. We just really didn't put that much thought into it, into the docks, quite frankly. But I think it is important, and I believe it should be part of this project.
So question, so these signs are great for helping people find places. Not so much finding parking,
It's in there.
is it in there?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
ones am I missing?
Parking
So
is the
that
focus of
was-
this, yeah.
That was, wherever there is, so there's basically gonna be parking to be had at Masconomo, at the town.
Right, I was looking at the design of the signs and they have,
Oh, that's all.
no, I know that, I'm
No.
looking.
You're actually looking at
I'm
the
looking
sign,
At the signs.
okay,
And-
like this,
Yeah.
like with
The
this.
big
type-
P on it?
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
trying to, I know the big P, but that one was not checked off.
You
That's
know, because we could decide, the reason why I didn't check that off is because we were gonna put parking on to minimize signs again, and it's not, cause this town is
Right.
needs to have slow change,
Yeah,
as we all know.
Just for clarification on what my question is,
Yes.
I'm looking at the slide that has the 6 red check marks of the recommended
Yes.
signs.
Yep. Yep.
That one, yes, thank you.
So that check mark over that C1 and 2 are kind of interchangeable. So you might decide that, for example, we were gonna have a sign that's right before, or right near the entrance to the town parking lot on either side of the driveway. We would just put the big P there.
That's what I'm asking about, because I do
It's
think
not
we need to
clear.
help people find the appropriate parking spots so that they're not wasting their time circling around resident parking only
And
streets.
the D
And-
signs also could have a P on them with an arrow.
Right, and the other ones just look so small. Like I said, I'm just thinking of people
Well,
driving.
well,
and
they're
moving.
they're 18 inches high
Right.
by 15 inches, so they're not,
Okay.
they're not that small. But that's what you would see for a no parking sign in a lot of communities, that's not.
On one.
So
So,
you could have
They're,
the
they're,
parking sign below the other sign too.
yeah, yeah, what's good about this system is it allows total flexibility. So you know, if it could be figured out how to put a sandwich board at the train station, maybe we could figure out how to put a directional sign there as well. I'm not sure, you know, that the MBTA is very
We're not really. trying-
generous with their cooperation. So,
Becky?
let's see.
I wanted to just make note that the business owners involved are the ones who are asked constantly, how do I do this, that, or the other? Yeah, they're asked for Singing Beach. They're asked for restrooms. And Lauren, what was the third, or Marlene?
Restrooms, Singing Beach, and where to eat, food, where to get food.
So
They asked for where they can get coffee, where they can get lunch,
okay, so
where they park, where is there more shopping? Like they don't know to go up around the corner.
So thank you, Lauren. That's why what we did, when you look at the deck and you see the signs, the items on the signs reflect what has the questions most frequently asked of business owners.
I guess I didn't see how you would find Laughing Gull, which is in one direction, and Boo Bird, which is in the opposite.
The signs say
You got arrows in
shops
both directions.
slash dining.
What I ran into when I was a stranger in a place was a sign that had a map with restaurant name, shop name. Now, I understand that you can do that
Yes,
with,
we can. We thought about putting one of those right in the middle of town, because then you could walk up to it and look at it and see where all, you know, coffee and lunch and all that. And that too would probably be, I mean, ideally suited for the grassy knoll in front of where the gas station is, because it's kind of right there or near the train, you know, where people are walking off the train across from Wheat Park or somewhere there.
Honestly, that feels like a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah.
And having experience doing this kind of stuff, I think you gotta think about
QR code.
what it is you're going to maintain. Yeah.
Looks like a shopping mall.
Yeah, yeah, because we wouldn't want an electric, okay, so,
Okay.
If you are,
we had,
the electronic now is so much easier to update.
you're right.
Just
They
keep-
are, but
keep
it's-
current.
That also needs to be maintained and someone
Right,
needs to be
right.
responsible for it.
Right.
But
Well, we
also
thought, we
signage.
discussed that, and we didn't think that it was necessarily appropriate for the ambience of, the existing ambience of Manchester by the Sea. Because
And the
those
signs do have to go.
digital signs are,
I'm not talking about the digital sign, I'm talking about a QR code on a nice
oh,
sign.
QR codes can go on any of these, yeah,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
That's my point.
yeah.
You have a hand raised, you can't see them. It's Terry Coleman has a hand.
Okay, Terry?
Good evening, Terry Kalman and Bike and Pedestrian Committee. We've reviewed this and commend the work that the team has done. It's excellent. Couple of suggestions. If we could extend the MBTA platform so that it connected to the street and the crosswalk that was recently installed, there might be an option then for people not to cross the parking lot, the active parking lot, walk to the end of the train platform and cross the street, and a sign potentially there at Reed Park. And that's one. Two, as you all know, Pine Street's, well, with the culvert project, Pine Street's going to be a significantly different operation in 25. So perhaps you want to think ahead to installation of that particular sign might be delayed, or you're going to have to cover it in some way, shape, or form in about a year when that major project takes place, because the directions are going to be totally different from some period of time. So otherwise, excellent plan, and we endorse it.
Thank you.
What do you need from us?
For you to, as a board, please let us know which view you prefer for signage, and in consideration of the recommendations of some signs, and I think there were very valid points about the parking and the people coming off the train, adding something in. Let us know how you would like to proceed in terms of getting any of these made.
Do we have a preference among the sign, among the color versus blue and dark blue?
I like the color one.
I think the color is not visually appealing.
Okay.
I have no preference. I have no preference, honestly.
It also reflects the KPN license plate.
Okay, I think we will go with just a consensus that we prefer the color.
Should we mock one up perhaps, Anne, so that you can look at one and see how you like it in real life, or?
I think you're not currently considering signs for school, the 128 exits, is that right?
No, we did note them on the map. And what we would recommend is that if you did want to have kind of like a sign that said, "Here you are, Manchester, you're here," even though it says it already on the sign, the green signs, we would recommend two of these gateway signs. One on the right coming to town on Pine, and one on the right coming in.
It's just having an arrow indicating which way you go to get there.
Yes.
But
Good point.
Those are not the things we're currently looking at. We're currently looking at.
No, but that is a good point. When you're coming up school, do you go left or right to Manchester? Yeah.
If you're talking about one of the corners of Pine and Central and Ridge.
Yeah.
And that would indicate Tux Point in one direction and the rest of town in the other direction. One at school and Union and Central. And that would probably have restaurants in both directions.
Shops both ways,
Okay,
parking both ways. Or mostly to the, you could decide, because parking is down on Mascanoma, and there is also parking along the street.
You can't go wrong no matter what you do.
I know.
That tells people there are Things
Stuff in both directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
But
Did
the-
you have,
Except for the beach.
did you have a plan for signs to indicate the cut from the town hall parking lot
That's a good
at
question.
both ends?
Yes, we did. In fact, those, of the few signs that we recommended, we're recommending one in front of the Keep Ann, you know, right where the current
Yeah.
piddly little thing is, which everybody makes fun of. We
It's
would
better
put-
than what was there before.
No kidding. And then there would be one at the walkway. We have to decide on that because will people coming into that parking lot know to look backwards to come, you know, if they're not new?
Mhm.
Because the cut through is right against where the water treatment plant and what is it, Mason's Hall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'd have to figure out how to, I would hope to, you know, Nate and to see what his recommendations would be as a civil engineer.
We had talked about having something more along the lines of a kiosk in the parking lot. Not one of those electronic, but something that could maybe show a map of the downtown with the direction to the walkway and the shops and dining
Again,
in the
Again.
parking lot.
update.
Well, no, we don't have to put down specifically
Mhm.
what the facility, what restaurants and shops.
Things that
But
won't
just a
change.
map that's showing.
Where the train
Roads.
is.
Right.
Train, beach, walkway, very
Restaurant.
QR code.
Exactly.
I think that would be very helpful, actually, because I remember the first time I tried to take the commuter rail, I'm like, I'm walking all over the place. How do I get, where's the platform? It's not
easy.
intuitive.
But it wasn't, when we talked about that, we felt that it might not be welcome to have a large kiosk on the common.
Can you show a picture of the monolith?
And that
Yeah.
way, once you get into the major parking lot, then there's more specific information. Yeah.
Oh,
So it's a flat, two-sided sign, but it's pretty large.
Yeah.
Double height of them.
yeah, it's huge.
And yeah, so, but we can do maps and.
Where would that go?
That
In the parking lot, I mean, it's not, I'm sorry,
Out back here.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
And then again, I think was maybe phase two. 'cause we're trying-
But you know,
one
we
of the
want to do
boards-
it all in phase one. We're fine with that.
Okay.
We just wanted to gently, like, get the town used to having this, so that it would be welcome. So
And
it's your
keep within
choice.
Maybe the flexible budget of DPW so that we could have a little trial without having to wait for another fiscal year.
What, okay. You're nodding your head up.
We're not talking a huge money here, so.
Yeah, no, do you think we could put up the 6 signs that they're,
Soon as possible. Yep, so we would just give you a final cost and.
so we would like to get a closer estimate based on the color picture.
Yes,
I think the signs that you've recommended, size and signs that you've recommended for those locations seem appropriate. Personally, I would add a parking just at the entrance to the town hall.
I agree. And I also think that what was brought up here, and I should have had a V8 moment, what you said. People coming off the train, they need something right there, and we have to solve for that. We were always hoping that the community center would be a visitor, you know, that would attract people there. There could be indoor maps, there could be a thing there. We were hoping in that direction. But you know, we can also think about the signage.
Is the board going to consider just going ahead, finding money out of a DPW account?
Yeah, for 6 signs.
For 6 signs?
Yeah. What's that
Is
total?
it more than 6 or are we just
Well, phase 1 is 6.
do 6?
But you discussed many more. I would leave it a little bit open and then try to develop a budget and see what fits. And then you phase them according to your budget. But you've already added 4 or 5 more to this with parking and location near the train station and even the parking lot at Town Hall. So you've added quite a few. So I would not restrict you at this point and let us come up with these elements and show them to everyone and say, does this work? As another aspect of this.
So we're at crunch time because we're at the end of the fiscal
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
So we just need to do this in the next week.
Yeah, so what I would recommend is, our best thinking is those 6 signs. I think we should add in, and it's not a lot of money, the notion of, parking, make sure we have 2 well-marked parking signs for the town lot. And I think we need to come up with something also not expensive for the train. So that would mean, if you're looking at costs, figure fourth, because these are all in ranges. Figure 4,000 to 5,000 is the range if you round up here. If we were to add one more, somewhere in around the train, maybe of this size, that's another 500. And if we were at another parking sign, that's another 500. So it'd be 1,000. So if you added 1,000 there, now these numbers should be looked at.
I'd also consider F as a very flexible sign for pedestrians.
Yep.
So we have some money that has to be spent by the end, that we can spend before the end of the fiscal year.
I gotta sit down with Chuck. I mean, I'm assuming we can.
We'll take a chunk, money out of Chuck's pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, one way or the other, I think we could find $6,000.
$6,000.
That's about it. I think that would be great.
That's right, that's parking rec money.
Is that with DPW doing the installation?
I'm sorry.
Is that with the DPW doing the installation? Because those are prices for signs, not installation.
Right, they were installed.
Does it include the pole, Mark?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so just one last question here. So what signs are disappearing?
Let's not disappear signs. That wasn't with
The
us.
walkway signs disappear.
Yes.
Well, that's enough for now.
Do I have a motion to, encourage the wayfinding group to put together a package of 8 signs, 2 for parking, and the 6 that they've described.
No.
And to arrange to have them installed, with the monies that are currently given.
So moved, friendly amendment, the colored option.
The colored options.
I second on that.
We ready to discuss? We ready to vote?
Everybody ready to vote?
Good. John?
Yes.
Ann says yes. Kathy says yes.
Yes.
Brian says yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Great job.
Thank you.
Very nice job.
Sometimes-
Work with Chuck and Greg and figure out how to make this happen.
You got it. Shall do.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Yep.
And thank you for Becky and
Yes.
Rosemary.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Mark, I think the show is now yours.
Okay, well, it's mine and members of the planning board. So at the last planning board meeting, well, as you know, for over a year, we had the task force from the planning board working on the MBTA zoning so that we can comply with the new mandate in the state law. And at the last planning board meeting, they voted to submit to your board the draft of the zoning that would allow the town to comply with the law. what the planning board's now asking select board to do is vote to forward that draft to EO HLC, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, for a preliminary review for compliance with the law. And they will do that within 90 days, hopefully a little quicker, so that we can get comments back to make final edits prior to the submittal to the select board to be on the warrant for the fall town meeting. So the draft that was sent out to the select board was reviewed by town council. We forwarded that to them. Had some discussions with them on that, and so we have that draft. It's the red line version that we have. I believe Jonathan Murray, our town council, there he is. Hello. Is on as well in case there are any legal questions that you may have.
Well, the first question I have is that we were sent something by the planning board and now we have something else.
Well, what you have mostly is just some legal editing by town council. It's not,
I guess what I'd like to hear from the planning board members who are here, whether they have seen those comments and whether they think that anything significantly changes what they approve, such that we should go back and approve what they approved. Sarah?
Well, I'll just say that this is what we're asking for is the permission to submit to HLC. So that's the first thing. This isn't a endorsement of this, you know, so this is a procedural vote. Maybe we can hear from Jonathan if there are any substantive changes. I think the board will probably make final tweaks if based on town council's review, but it's my understanding it wasn't anything terribly substantive. So Chris has looked at it, Mark.
Yeah, I looked at it carefully and I think it's fine to send to the state. I think there are some tweaks that are going to happen along the way, of course.
And after it comes back and even between now and when it comes back, we probably.
There'll be more tweaking, yes, of course.
So this isn't done.
This isn't done.
This is not done.
Okay.
This
Several steps
is
before
the general structure of what we're talking about doing. We're sending it to the state to have them say, no, you're way out of bounds here, or what you're doing fits our model.
I guess the thing that concerns me is the last page, 593 to 595. This seems like I'm not sure I understand what the change is here.
Our current bylaw says that all zoning changes are 2/3. The state has changed their requirements. And this is asking the town to adopt that officially. We have in the past had, recent past, had zoning changes that were approved by an authority. I think. No?
We didn't take advantage of that.
We proposed some, but never got a vote at town meeting.
Okay, it's fine. I knew it was going to discuss. So.
So where our bylaws say one thing, this would change our bylaw, right?
Yes.
Or is it the
This would
state's
This would make our bylaw conform with the state.
state? Right now, we don't. What happens if the people in town don't want to do that?
Then we have to pass everything by 2/3.
It's not.
Right,
yeah.
Jonathan.
Okay, Jonathan, okay.
We have that discussion.
All right.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Jonathan Murray from KP Law. So the change that I'm seeing here in number 3 is, as the chair indicated, the legislature amended the zoning act to require only a simple majority vote for certain types of zoning amendments. So this would bring the bylaw consistent with the zoning act. Say, for example, there was a special town meeting tomorrow and we had a zoning amendment that could qualify for a simple majority under the zoning act. You could still proceed notwithstanding your local bylaw because the state statute would control. So this is really a kind of housekeeping measure, in my view, to bring your bylaw in conformity with the state act.
I'm not saying I don't do or don't want to do that, but what I see is this thing going to town meeting and someone wanting to make an amendment here to keep it the way it is.
So I also think it might be advisable to have this as a separate article,
Yeah.
And say at the beginning.
either at the beginning or at the end.
Well,
But
If
yeah,
you've
at the
already-
beginning would make more sense because it would then.
yes.
You know what you're voting.
Right.
I think Sue has thought about this.
Yeah.
I have,
So.
so
Sue Philbrook, in case anybody doesn't know it.
on the planning board, so the issue is, quantum of vote, it's called. And it's the state law now that many, amendments to zoning are subject to a majority vote, whether people like it or not, that's the law. And this change would simply make our bylaws conform to state law. Right now, they don't. And we need to keep changing our bylaws so that they do conform to state law. One thing that is important on Greg's point in doing it as a separate warrant article, I agree that each of these changes should be separate warrant articles. Because, for example, the change to the marijuana distribution requirements, that's not a zoning change that can be decided by a simple majority. That does require 2/3. So if we lump it together with the MBTA zoning, that wouldn't be a good idea. I think it would be much easier for everyone to understand if each of them were drafted separately.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of splitting it up, but
I'm agree with that. I think there are some issues about leaving questions on the same ballot.
Let me interrupt just slightly to say that the purpose of this is not to put it in front of town meeting.
Right.
This is a draft for the purpose of having the state review it and tell us where we are relative to their understanding of 48 3A.
It's a compliance check,
It's a compliance check.
period.
yeah, I'm fine
So
with
the
that.
question is it good enough to go forward for a compliance check?
I guess it's just something down the road that I'm thinking.
Yeah, is the state gonna review the marijuana issue, even though it's the last paragraph here? Or they're really looking at this from an MBTA perspective, and that's it.
Yeah, we're probably not gonna weigh in on that.
Yeah.
Actually, Sue,
They will, the municipal law unit will review it because they're sending it simultaneously to the municipal law unit and HLC. And they will review that to make sure it is consistent with state law, not having to do with the MBTA. So
in fact, they're going to review our entire zoning bylaw, I think.
HLC will.
HLC will review our entire, to see if there are any pieces in our zoning bylaw that are not corrected to be conformed.
So right now, the state says that voting with regard to regulation of marijuana business is a 2/3 vote. So when they come back with their comments, they make certain comments on the MBTA, but this, they will say, no, you can't do this. Because if we submit this as it is, we're saying that's a majority vote.
Well, I think we go.
Are we getting caught in the weeds here?
Yeah, it doesn't make any difference what they say on that. We're gonna focus on the
All
MBTA.
I care about at this point is to make sure that the 4A, 3A, we're complying, conceptually, we've hit the mark. Is that correct? Yes, yeah,
But-
everything else is housekeeping later on.
But I think there's other stuff involved here that people are thinking about too.
All we
Right,
care
I
about is
think-
the state at this point.
Right, I think what I would suggest is, because you're right, Jeff, you know, there's a lot of nitty-gritty detail. What I would suggest is, I believe this is good enough to go forward for a compliance check. What we should also discuss, though, is let's backtrack from a potential town meeting date, okay? And commit to having a clean copy to review, okay, far in advance of when we have to approve a warrant, okay? That's what I'd like to see, because I think we're all talking about valid details, but we're gonna have to rediscuss everything because we haven't got the state feedback yet. So I think this is good enough, but let's set a timeline that we are gonna commit to, so we're not getting stuff last minute.
So to that point, I don't think we should wait
Right.
until the end of
No.
August
No.
Yeah.
or September to work on some of these details. I think we need to keep going, even though we don't have all of the state comments. Yeah, some of these details are independent of their.
Exactly,
comments.
yes.
So,
My thought was we're sitting
Including
here
her.
to discuss the MBTA zoning, the 43, everything else is in. So let's get this in front of the state.
Yes, we need to, from a timing perspective, we need to get it in front of the state because they, in their regulations, they say they have 90 days to do the review. So we really want to try and get that back in less than 90 days so that we have all of September to discuss any comments they submit. We'll have the municipal law unit comments beforehand. Before that, Jonathan has indicated that
He had his hand up. I wondered if he.
that might happen quicker.
Yeah, so the town planner's point, just for the board's information, the EOHLC has strived to get their comments back within 90 days. Based off of our experience in the spring, you should know that it's closer to the 90-day mark rather than before. And even if we've had instances of the most perfect zoning bylaw ever, but EOHLC still has comments. So just for the board's information, the sooner you can get it in, I think the better it is, just because you're giving yourself that cushion in the fall to make changes, have your planning board hearing, and then address any comments that HLC has.
So we can run concurrently then.
Right.
The planning board can run concurrently with these other comments.
That's good.
Yes.
I mean, I think an ideal scenario is to have a final version by the 1st of October. And that's gonna be really tight. It's gonna be very tight, but then that would give, a good 6 weeks of having that final version making the rounds in town. So if we're targeting a mid-November special meeting. I just hate, I don't think you should go past Thanksgiving. I think you should do it in November. If at all possible.
Well, there is some good news, which is the consultant we used helped design the project. So we're hoping that her guidance is going to have some weight with the state. So we're not doing this in a vacuum.
But there will be comments, I'm
I'm sure
sure.
there'll be comments, yeah.
You're right. Hopefully they're not so substantial that. Yeah, it's a rerun. I don't think it will be.
I think we can envision that there are 2 types of, or maybe 3 types of buckets of input, that at least as I envision it. One is just the basic model. And I think we're pretty confident that we follow the state's model, that the districts, the density and the parameters. And that's the real meat of the work. And then there's how have we written the rules around implementing those districts. And it seems to me that that's where they may have some wording changes or some. And then the third area are the design standards and the site plan review, which again, they may have some applicability and some comments around those that we can tweak. But I think if you think of it in those buckets, the first is the real compliance, the districts and the density. And I think we believe we're in very good shape on that, and everything else is the pieces around it.
And also the and then there's the strategy, which is outside of and the information to the public that is outside of that review. And I think that is something that we need to start working on right away. And also there has already been, how many public forums? A number of public forums, whatever, density walk,
Countless.
website. So we've started that work and more needs to happen to for sure. Yeah.
That's me.
But you were just,
I move the select board pass the draft community housing overlay district zoning bylaw along to the state for review.
Friendly amendment as amended by our town council.
second,
Accept that amendment.
Ready to vote? John?
Yes.
Anne says yes.
Yes.
Kathy says yes. Brian?
yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Thank you.
So 90 days.
Thank you to the task force for all its hard work.
Yeah.
This has been a task force, and to Mark.
Yeah.
Came in just at the nick of time.
Thank God.
Oh, thank God.
Mark this one right into the best.
Let's send it off next week.
Good. So that would go out by next week then.
Yeah, well, there are some forms that we have to put together, so I have a meeting with Emily on Thursday, our consultant, to put the forms together. Hopefully we'll have it ready to send out next week, so.
So just, Jonathan, do you have any guidance on the actual submittal or in terms of those forms?
And I'm happy to help. I suspect Emily knows how to submit them. I would also just say for the board's benefit, we've developed in our office a good relationship with the two people at HLC reviewing these, and then we have a good relationship with the municipal law unit. So if something comes up after we've submitted this and a board or someone has a question, just let me know, and we have back channels to get those answers pretty quickly.
That's great, thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Great. Another milestone.
So along the way.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The next thing are liaison updates. John, you have a better handle on liaison. You have a liaison to the Concom at the moment.
Brian, I think, is taking that over. It's a little gray as to when that is in effect, but nothing has happened.
I haven't even looked at one next meeting. Yes, that was so fun.
Yeah.
Unless you want that.
I've never had it and I don't want it. Okay, fine.
Okay.
Somebody asked me and I didn't remember.
Okay, Brian and I swapped. I took library and he took Concom.
You won this deal.
Well, I don't know, library's got an application. It depends what happens with the application.
I can speak with, pickleball is for, mid-July, I think, installation. It was, it all over, there was an issue last week. There was some people climbing the fence. Didn't realize that you really needed to play pickleball that bad. Now it's now a 10 or 12 foot fence. It's fascinating to me. I don't know how they plan on getting out either, but. So, was this bringing, bearing it? I drove by midday on Saturday. It was snowing. So it is, I think the issues are first thing in the morning and after work during the day.
Yeah.
And yesterday I drove by, again, having to move my car every 2 hours. I drove and it was like three courts were on, being played on yesterday afternoon, 2:30. So it is the mornings and the afternoons. But people out exercise, and then now as the newly appointed liaison for VBA, we have two new members.
Congratulations.
But just through today. You don't know how it is. That's me, I'm done.
I was not able to attend the Board of Health meeting last week, so I think Greg might have an update for us in the TA report. I'm interested in hearing about it. And that's all I have.
I was at a school committee meeting, I forgot my notes, they're they have decided to go ahead with the signs at Highland Field. They've decided on the price, but they haven't decided on
what?
the rules. How big a sign,
Oh,
who, what kind of business, you know, do we have marijuana businesses advertising on Highland Field?
will they all be the same size, kind of like they
Yeah.
are in Sweeney? Because that's a very neat
Yeah,
presentation.
right, well, yeah, TBD.
Okay. See.
And, the NGPA zoning task force may or may not be dead. I'm hoping it's dead. The planning board's taking over that function.
Do we have to do anything? Because we kind of, did we spawn that jointly with the planning board? From a procedural standpoint, how do we shut down that committee at the time it is, when the time is right?
Sometimes right, yeah, I mean, I think there's a role for them to play in outreach.
Right, oh yeah, no,
Yeah,
I'm just
well,
saying, is that a kind of a joint
Got a few months.
vote?
Yeah,
Is that a joint vote between the planning board and select board to shut that down?
yeah, I think.
Okay, then, does anyone having the task force and the planning board meet jointly every time is an awkward way to run that business. Is there a way, maybe you could say separate out the outreach to give
Right,
it,
so,
so
well, right, that should be a discussion with the planning board and the task force in terms of how to deal with any fine tuning that is gonna take place. Is that something that the planning board wants the task force to still assist with or not? And if not, then it can move into that outreach role. Maybe there's, you know, a couple of the planning board members who were on the task force, they can be the bridge. So that might be a new phase to move into. As you said, rather than having a joint meeting every time.
it's a lot.
Right.
A path to that. So we need to have a joint meeting of the two and
Yes,
to discuss.
path
I don't do that forward.
and how the two groups want to work together.
So perhaps I should get in touch with Chris. And see if we can get this discussion on the planning board's next meeting, which I think is a week from today.
Right.
Okay.
So, conversations with Chris and Sarah at a minimum, just to work out some of those ideas at least ahead of time.
Jeff?
Nothing to report.
Town administrator.
So, back to parking and placards and stickers. We do have the unique situation of Shark's Mouth. So the challenge here is, you know, you allow owners of properties who are not necessarily residents, they can do stickers for their cars. In this case, you have owners who never bring their own cars here, so they're renting a car. and are using that rental car while they're here. So you have said that placards are not good on the weekends, so that's the issue.
Owners can get resident, oh, they're not, well, they own property, so.
So they're entitled to a sticker.
Yeah.
The problem is they don't
Yeah.
have a car to
Put
affix
it on.
it to.
Okay,
So we
but
could,
like when I had to use a rental car, okay, my car was being serviced in
Similar
2 weeks.
situation.
I just got, there was a special placard that Diane gave
that's
me.
what I'm suggesting we do here. We give them a placard that allows.
It's not
70
something special or new, it's just we allow them to have the ones we already use. That's kind of what I'm not understanding what's
So the
new
ones that I
here.
think we are allowed them,
They're not
just
good for,
not good for weekends. You have to get them a weekend.
What's new here is that normally you already have a sticker that does go on a car.
Right.
And in this case, that's not happening because that car is never in town.
No, I understand. I'm just saying, so they wouldn't have gotten one in the mail, is what you're saying. But when I went to, get my placard, I mean, I think Diane has other ways of looking up their residency, right? Or-
Yes,
Yeah, so
that's fine.
I'm just saying, it sounded like we were talking about something new, a new placard, and I think there's one that already exists that can serve this.
When you got a
It
placard,
can, I agree.
Because it was usable, I could use it at the beach, I could use it
Yeah,
so
anywhere.
you went to the beach on Saturday or on some weekend, nobody asked any questions. All right, then she must have a.
Yeah, no, she can do that.
She must have a
I think
special.
she has
Okay,
one,
the
yeah.
issue then, and I think the answer, if you're agreeable, is yes.
Yes. I'm okay with it.
I think we just gotta make sure that they're not getting a sticker too.
Correct.
You know what I mean? Like through
We don't want to
the
double.
normal process, they're not automatically
Well,
getting a
they wouldn't have a
sticker.
car. They wouldn't have a registered car, then it's only going to registered cars.
So that's what I'm not understanding,
No,
because
but
this is like any
But they
resident.
have a
residential-
registered car somewhere.
Yeah, they live in Florida.
Yeah, but it's probably, is it registered in Manchester?
They live in Florida.
Doesn't have to be, you have to, as long as you're a property owner, you can walk up to the town clerk and get something, either a sticker or a placard that allows you to get to Singing Beach, resident parking, all of it.
Right, I just don't want both going up. That's all I'm saying.
Right, we would make sure we're not issuing
Yeah.
both
Yeah.
to the same person.
Yeah.
And again, the property manager would be helping us monitor and issue.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to double check and make sure we were okay with that, so we can, Diane and I can look at that. So thank you, that's all needed there. Retreat next week?
Yes, all set up for the 25th. There will be a pre-wedding dinner at the club at the same time. It's big enough that depending on the weather, if it's warm and lovely, we get one end of the deck, they get the other side of the deck. If it's cold and rainy, we get the library and they get the big room. And
So
we
what I'm
can,
hearing is that this retreat will be catered for us.
Yes.
yes,
So it is officially a public meeting, so we
Yes.
do, typically we don't. A lot of people, but nonetheless, it is officially open to them.
so
So if you have topics you want to make sure you want to have covered, me or Ann, get those topics in. But generally, it's how did we do this past year? And the goals and priorities, what did we get accomplished, what went well, what didn't go so well? What are the priorities for the upcoming year? A little bit of brainstorming and hopefully having time to narrow that down to a manageable number. So in a sentence or two, that's generally what we try to do. Welcome your thoughts and how to make that productive. Item 3, as Kathy mentioned, the Board of Health did meet last Thursday and finalized their public hearing, closed the public hearing on the proposed well regulations. They did adopt new well regulations. They did modify the proposals fairly significantly in terms of the testing requirements for existing wells, for irrigation systems, existing irrigation systems. They scaled that back, and are requiring every 5 years, just the basic, I think, 4 or 5 elements. Nitrate, nitrite. I'm not gonna remember them all. E. coli and a couple more.
So that's not a huge cost to,
No, that isn't. Those basics are they're less than $100 typically.
How is that
5
enforced?
years now.
How is that enforced? Or followed up on? Let's say I own a well and someone gonna come knocking at my door if I'm in year 6 and haven't had a,
They have to identify who has a well.
Right, so
that's what I'm
yeah, I
getting
was
at.
gonna
That's
ask
what I'm
that.
getting at.
so that is a challenge. But, determining who actually has wells.
No, I understand, but I'm just saying, for the ones we do know, do we already have an operational process to follow up and know when they're inspected and et cetera?
So we haven't been doing that. We haven't been inspecting.
You haven't been inspecting them at all?
No.
Okay, got it.
So this is new.
So it's a brand new operational process that,
Well, please.
So for new wells, there is a requirement to do the baseline testing, which is extensive. Be in the range of $800 or so. And the board felt that additional cost compared to the $1,000 you're spending on the new well was obviously not insignificant, but it could be rolled into the costs of the new well.
so is the cost of the testing going to cover the cost of this town having this new operational service?
No. That hasn't been discussed.
So this is what we discussed when we talked about fees of other things, right? And we raised some of the building inspection fees and that kind of stuff. We just at least need to understand when we're setting fees, how much of the true cost are we covering? Because everything else falls on the taxpayer.
Right, so we're not collecting the fees for the testing. That's just between the property owner and the testing company, the lab.
Right, but what I'm getting
So-
at is there's
No,
gotta
no,
be
no,
an
no.
operational process to make
Right.
sure the testing happens. Who is paying for that?
At this point, it's being absorbed by staff time.
So
In
it's the
theory, that's
taxpayers.
a phone call. Have you got the test results? Then
Right.
there's no site visit or anything like, it's just,
No, but follow-up can get expensive,
Yeah.
right? It can definitely get expensive, so. I just think it's something to think about every time we have a new regulation, right?
Correct.
We're asking staff to absorb, but unless they're sitting around twiddling their thumbs, it's really not just absorbing. They're not doing something else, or they're not doing something they could be doing, so keep an eye on.
Yeah, I agree.
how many wells are there?
Well,
80,
We don't know.
we don't really know.
90? I think it's in that area.
We think it is.
Mostly on loading places.
Loading places is drinking wells. This is most of this.
Oh,
I mean, most of the wells we have are irrigation wells.
Okay.
That's the majority of our wells.
Is there still talk of requiring disinfectants or chlorinization
For new wells,
for
yeah.
new well? Just going forward or?
For when a well is initially brought online, before it is used, it needs to be disinfected.
But down the line,
Right, no requirement,
no maintenance of that.
unless the testing is showing a
Yeah,
bacterial
sure.
infection or something.
No, so, I mean, what's gonna happen is you're gonna start with a bolus of test. Nobody's doing anything right now. I would assume that.
Mhm.
And so you're gonna find out, you're gonna tell a whole bunch of people, all right, start doing testing. So this isn't like 80 wells, say it was 80 wells, spread over 5 years. This is 80 wells as a shot, then nothing for 4 years, and then there's another shot.
That's why I'm poking at the John's doing a better job explaining. That's why I'm poking at the
No, I understand.
operational, right?
Yeah.
Because you gotta have a
There's a
startup
bolus.
period. You may want to phase it.
Phase it in.
Maybe,
And that'll, otherwise the staff won't be able to absorb it. And
not if it's a bolus.
I just don't want to see, in next year's budget, a hiring request to go chase down errant well owners, right? So
I'll have to decide how to implement that. Maybe just chase a few people each year or something. I don't know.
Odd, it's like the odd and even numbers on the street, right? Something.
So you spread it out.
So certainly a conversation that we can have with the board. Board of Health.
Is that? If we were to impose a fee for irrigation well owners to cover, would that be Board of Health or?
Yes. Yeah, the last thing here, I just was giving you some background information on revolving government enterprise fund, just so FYI, we can have more in-depth discussion on that when we revisit, in particular, the Harvard Department as a potential enterprise fund.
The harbor is never going to produce enough revenue to pay for dredging.
Correct.
No.
Correct.
Um,
Very similar to how the water and sewer are never gonna
right, but
generate enough funds for their
But-
capital needs either.
one of the things that Kathy and here set up was to make the launch service a separate entity. If we do an enterprise fund that incorporates all of the harbor stuff, then that
Not
gets
separate,
mixed,
yeah.
Yeah,
that
that's,
gets mixed up.
yeah.
So suddenly we may discover that in fact the mooring holders are subsidizing the launch.
Well, A, you could set it up as its own enterprise. B, you can have it as a sub-enterprise, if you will, and keep and still track it separate. So that it doesn't get mixed in. I mean, I think it's been clear that you don't want to have it mixed in.
Right.
And that you want to make sure we're tracking those expenses and revenue so that we can say at the end of each season, did it cover its costs or not? Right.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need to set up a separate fund, they should have some. tracking.
I got a question about that. So coming from a school system, I know like grant wise, sometimes when you put stuff in certain categories, it makes getting grants easier or can change that. If we put that into an enterprise fund, will it change our grant ability for the harbor either way?
No, I don't think it would. If we said that the capital expenses would never be supported by the general fund, then it might make it more difficult to get bonds. So I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yeah.
But in terms of the grants, no, I don't see that as
It doesn't,
affecting.
wouldn't
it one
affect
way.
it either way, better or worse.
Especially if it's an enterprise fund and there's no other money. So wouldn't the grant be project specific for,
Well, my thought was that if you take the launch out of the harbor, it would look better as you move forward for the harbor. In other words, you don't have that money coming in, going into the harbor.
In terms of
I guess it
need,
doesn't
need
matter.
for money, is that what you're saying? Need for other revenues?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, we.
In
do-
either case, you'd want to explain. Yeah, we have this $100,000 or $50,000, but it really is
Yeah, it's not enough.
100% for the launch service. That type of thing.
Right.
I mean, it might be worth exploring, like you said, having the launch service as an enterprise fund on its own.
Yeah.
There's probably is some sort of a dollar threshold that typically you wouldn't engage in that type of bureaucracy unless there was, you know, you're dealing with budgets of a certain size, so
Yeah,
that's why
probably no hard and fast rules, but there's
you
some,
probably have a good sense, or Andrea, you know. But that would be my only question. You usually don't want to segregate money more than you have to unless it's big enough to warrant that type
Right.
of.
Like right now, this is what, less than $100,000.
yeah, it's under 50.
It's under 50, excuse me.
Yeah, so it's kind of small right now.
My only thought is that we've been on this now for 4 weeks.
Yeah.
They've already broken one launch. Let's see how it goes before we make
Right,
a major
exactly. Yeah,
restructuring
I
of
agree.
the town's finances.
Yep.
Oops.
Boats are full of oops.
Yep.
I'm glad they have two.
And it was so woman.
Oh, that's all I have.
Motion
Yes,
to adjourn.
Second.
Jeff,
Yes.
Brian.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
okay.
That's amazing. I thought this was gonna go until tomorrow.
And we actually got some stuff
Yeah.
done and
That's
that's
right.
That's a first too.
No, it's not.
I could accomplish something.
all.